Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to today's Hindu analysis. Let's begin with the first article that is based on what India can learn from what Taiwan is doing right now. The author here is saying that from Taiwan's stand towards China, India can take a lot of very valuable lessons. So he lists out those lessons specifically about how India should deal with China. Now, as you know, USA's House of Representatives Speaker, that is Miss Nancy Pelosi, was in Taiwan recently. That led to a lot of diplomatic issues with China issuing multiple warnings and even shooting missiles nearby Taiwan just to show off its aggressive stand. However, that did not stop Taiwan from actually going ahead and hosting Miss Pelosi and making a big view out of it. They did not downplay the visit. They invited as much media as possible. They gave as many news reports as possible about this visit. They did not really try to downplay it. And there lies a lesson for India as per the author who has written this article. Now, there are multiple lessons that he points out. Lesson number one. He says that India has not been very clear about telling its position with respect to China. India and Chinese troops, as you know, have been facing each other since 2020 Galwan clashes. It has been close to 2 years since the two sides have been facing each other, and by the accounts of all the experts, the Chinese troops are in the Indian territory and they are occupying it illegally. However, there has not been any clarity from the government side about how exactly is the government dealing with it, or there has not been even clarity about accepting the fact whether or not something like this has actually happened. Everyone knows that there has been some illegal occupation on the Indian territory, but government has just not accepted it. Now, there may be multiple reasons for that. In India, national security can very easily become a political issue. So opposition political parties would also want to catch the government if the government accepts that Chinese are sitting in the Indian territory. That can be one reason why the government of India is not accepting it. There can be other reasons also. The government does not want to accept the fact that we ceded any territory or we are looking weak. That is why for over 2 years now there has not been much clarity over where do we stand, where the Chinese right now, what steps are we taking, so on and so forth. This is the first lesson. That is, we should be very clear. Taiwan, for example, is very clear with China. They tell China what they think is their territory and they tell China what they think is not their territory. So this is lesson number one that we can learn. Second lesson from Taiwan. As I said, Taiwan government made no attempt to downplay Miss Pelosi's visit. That is, they invited as much media as possible. They gave it the prime time news. They did not want to appease China. Now, appeasement of China is something that many countries actually opt for, including India. Most of the nations don't want to be in the bad books of China because China obviously is a military and economic superpower and you don't want to be on the wrong side of China. That is why most of the countries that have a territorial dispute against China, you would see that those countries don't want to offend China. And the author is saying that the same seems to be the case with India. Although India has been in direct confrontation with China for over 2 years now, we still have been holding meetings, hosting Chinese leaders to come here. The Chinese foreign minister, for example, a few months back landed in India and talked to India. We also participated in the SCO summit recently. This all indicates that we have not been able to take a very strict stand. And then look at Taiwan. Taiwan knows that appeasing China or just agreeing to what China is saying is not the real solution to this problem. Because China is like a bully. Remember, we used to have these bullies in the school, the kids that used to impose their dominance on other kids. If you actually accept what they are demanding, or if you try to appease them, it will only make them stronger. So Taiwan has understood the fact that appeasing China is not really the solution, and India should also do the same. On the other hand, what India has done is we have actually curtailed our relationship with Taiwan just to please China. For example, India and Taiwan have not had any significant dialogue since 2017. All this shows that India wants to appease China rather than confronting it. This is lesson number two. The third lesson here, as per the author here, is that when China says that they are objecting to something, let's say China says we don't like the Quad, or China says that we don't like when we establish better relationships with Vietnam because South China Sea is China's territory, then the usual reaction of India is that we accept what Chinese are saying and we take a step back. However, that should not be the case. Just because China doesn't like cod, just because China doesn't like India having relationship with Taiwan, doesn't really mean that we have to actually take it back. China is a sovereign country just as India. We have the right to take our own decisions. Take the example of Taiwan. Taiwan is not really concerned with what China is saying. Secondly, the other interesting part is many people say that maybe why India and other nations actually want to appease China or don't want to go China on a bad mood is because economically we are all dependent on China. China has trade with almost all the nations in the entire world, and the world's supply chain is actually dependent on China. That is why people don't want to criticize them. However, look at the example of Taiwan. Taiwan has had very bad relationship with China, as we all know. But that aside, their trade relations with China have always been very, very strong. And these two things do not really mix with each other. Mainland China is Taiwan's largest trading partner. And China, in fact, has a trade deficit to Taiwan of about 80 billion to 130 billion dollars. Taiwan is one of the very, very few nations, if you want to call it a nation, that actually has a trade surplus with China. So China and Taiwan may not see eye to eye with each other, they may threaten each other, but the reality is that their trade still goes on. And therein lies a lesson for India as well. We should not be afraid of taking action against China thinking that our trade will be hurt because these two are separate things as we can see from China-Taiwan relationship as well. In fact, there has been considerable investment from Chinese companies into Taiwan and from Taiwanese companies into China as well. These are the lessons that India must learn if we have to counter Chinese approach. This is also a good time to see what exactly is the status of India-Taiwan relations. Now, as we discussed in yesterday's CNA as well, India, like most other nations across the world, follows the One China policy, meaning that we have also not recognized Taiwan as an independent sovereign nation. So we do not have any formal diplomatic relationship with Taiwan, but the two sides do have representative offices in each other's capitals. India also had trade ties with Taiwan that in 2019 were about $7.5 billion. Now, mainly Taiwan is known world over for being the largest producer of semiconductor chips, the same chips that were in very, very short supply throughout the world during the pandemic, and even today the normal level of the chip supply has not really come back. So they are very, very well known for electronics, semiconductor chips, and these kind of production. Taiwan has also been well known for experimenting in the best of electronics technology, communication technology, so on and so forth. As I said, the biggest challenge between India and Taiwan remains India's stand of accepting the One China policy. There are just about 15 nations around the world that recognize Taiwan as an independent country, and India is not one of them. I wish to take you back a few months. If you remember, we discussed that in Eastern Europe, there is a small nation called Lithuania. Lithuania recently went ahead and they confronted China by accepting Taiwan as a sovereign nation, and they in fact improved their relationship with Taiwan. That became a big issue between China and Lithuania. So there are some smaller countries that have shown the courage to actually stand up against China, but most other nations have not done this. The one very, very important thing on which India can actually take help of Taiwan is India, as you know, has been trying to improve our capacity to develop plants for semiconductor chips and make India a hub for its development. For that, we can take a lot of help from Taiwan since they are the world leader in semiconductor and electronics equipments. Also, there are some important facts about Taiwan that you must remember. Taiwan is a healthy populous state, so much so that their population is close to 2.3 crore. However, they are still not a part of the UN because obviously China does not recognize them as an independent sovereign nation. For China, Taiwan is a part of their country only. So Taiwan is right now the largest and the most populous economy which is not a part of the United Nations. They're a global leader in chip manufacturing but still not a part of the UN. That is because the Chinese government says that Taiwan is just one of our provinces, and because China is a part of the UN, Taiwan does not have to be a part of the UN independently on its own. And that is why India's relationship with Taiwan is also highly impacted by what China feels, which should not be the case. These are some of the other details I want to share with you about India-Taiwan trade relations. These are the latest numbers, as you can see. Our trade with Taiwan is mainly about machinery, electrical equipment. That also includes semiconductor and other kind of equipments. The next article that we have for you here is about Indian government's initiative to launch the ONDC, that is Open Network for Digital Commerce. The authors here are discussing how exactly would this go forward and what does the Indian government need to do to improve this. Although we have discussed this earlier, but those who have not listened to this discussion, let me quickly try and explain what is ONDC and how would it work. So let's understand the e-commerce market of India right now. It may happen that if you are searching for a product, especially of the local manufacturer on Flipkart, you might not find the same product on Amazon. And when you find something on Amazon, the same seller might not be selling it on Flipkart. Why? Companies such as Flipkart, Amazon, etc. have a kind of a exclusive contract, especially with the local manufacturers. The contract is, if you are selling on our platform, then you cannot sell the same thing on a competitor's platform. This is one problem. The second problem is that the local shopkeepers in India, they are still not connected to this online market, because for that they would have to invest some money in the infrastructure, software, see how the orders are coming, so on and so forth. So there are two big problems an Indian e-commerce market is facing right now as per the government. One, that the common people, the common shopkeepers are still not connected to it. Secondly, these e-commerce platforms are actually forcing these sellers to choose one of the platforms of them. There is a third problem also. If you have noticed, what Amazon started as was that Amazon did not have their own product, or Flipkart did not have any of their own products. They just sold the products of other sellers. However, over time what they have done is Amazon has also brought out its own products. Flipkart also has brought out its own products. So now, for example, if you are searching for a keyboard, that you want to buy a keyboard on Flipkart or Amazon, the first or the second result that you will see will always be of their own company's keyboard or mouse. That is also unfair. So these companies are now bringing their own brand, giving preference to those, and they are the ones who come at the top of the search. And usually when you're trying to buy something, you usually buy the first product or the second product that appears in the search. All these problems government of India wants to resolve, and the government is trying to open up a new kind of a network where everyone can sell with equal powers. This will be ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce. So in simple terms, what will happen is, let's say you go to ONDC and you search that I want to buy, let's assume some local thing, let's say I want to buy curtains. So what government is saying is that you will get the search results from curtains from all the websites, from Amazon also, from Flipkart also, from other e-commerce websites also. So there is no distinction between which particular platform is it that you are selling. Sellers of all the platforms will be connected under this one system. Also, government will make it much easier for smaller sellers to come in, and they don't have to give a lot of commission to Amazon, Flipkart and these kind of e-commerce platforms. This is the idea. The authors are saying that this is a good time to introduce this because India in the past few decades has seen a lot of smartphones being sold. Broadband has now become a much more common commodity as compared to earlier. We have seen a lot of revolutions with UIDAI, that is Aadhaar, UPI. All these things have revamped the market and made India ready for all these technologies. And this is the right time to introduce the ONDC as well. However, their point is that while ONDC is a good idea, for this idea to actually convert into a successful idea, the one thing that the government needs to focus on is online dispute resolution. Now, what is this? Let's say I have a problem with my order on Flipkart or Amazon or Swiggy or Zomato. Most of them have this option that you can just chat online, you can register a complaint and the complaint will be resolved. A lot of times when you order your food from Swiggy and you get the food, it is not what you ordered, it is something else, or the quantity is lesser. You can file a complaint, you don't have to call anywhere, and they most probably will refund your money. This is called online dispute resolution. This is what gives the confidence to the people to use these platforms. So if the government really wants common people to come on the ONDC and the sellers also to come on ONDC, the one thing that they have to focus on is how are they able to resolve these disputes. Because only if these disputes are resolved easily in an online manner, only then this platform will be a success. So government should focus on providing 24/7 support in local regional languages. Big websites such as Alibaba of China, eBay, all of these have some kind of online dispute resolution. Now government knows this technology and government itself actually provides the option of online dispute resolution in various forms. For example, let's look at RTI. If you have to file an RTI, you can just go to the RTI online website and file a complaint. If you have to file a complaint in a consumer court, there is a platform called Ingram where you can actually go and file a complaint. RBI has their own complaint portal online which is called the RBI CMS. So there are many examples which the government has been using to allow online dispute resolution. The same kind of system has to be adopted in the ONDC as well. Yes, for bigger challenges, you would need the courts and the consumer forums to step in, but most of the times, a majority of challenges do not need to go to courts, etc. They are just very small issues about late delivery, not good quality, not enough quantity, etc. Those kind of things can be very easy resolved and should be able to be resolved on online portals as well. Only then the idea of ONDC will become a success. Now, I'm sure all of you have read about ONDC earlier as well. This is just a refresher. The ONDC, the government is selling it by saying it would have much more transparent rules. So the monopoly of the e-commerce giants will be destroyed. It would not require a lot of investment from you. Lower cost of business acquisition because now Flipkart, Amazon, etc. charge a lot of commission from anyone who wants to sell at their platforms. And it will also allow the local sellers to actually scale their product on a much larger all India level. This is what the government has been trying to do. Because the e-commerce market in India has been changing in such a manner that there are only two main competitors now like Amazon and Flipkart, we have to ensure that this does not turn into a monopoly or a duopoly. So government has to ensure that all other people are able to sell online without any special preference given to only some sellers. This is what will be done by the ONDC. As I said, ONDC will give a platform for all the sellers and buyers irrespective of whichever platform that you are on. Anyone selling on Flipkart will also be able to come here. Anyone selling on Amazon will also be able to sell their products on this particular platform. The next article that we have here is about India's NDC, that is Nationally Determined Contributions. These are in simple terms of promises made by nations in the 2015 Paris Climate Change Summit. The promises that the governments across the world made to ensure that the average temperature of the earth does not increase by 2 degrees Celsius or more. The article has been written because the 27th COP of the UNFCCC is about to begin in Egypt in November. So it is time to revisit the targets that the nations had made. Now, as you know, in 2015 in the Paris climate deal, India had made a lot of commitments, most of which were very optimistic. For example, India had said that we will reduce our emission intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030. 40% of our installed electricity capacity will be sourced from renewable energy, so on and so forth. India, in fact, went one step ahead. In 2021, that is last year, when the COP26 was held in Glasgow, Prime Minister Modi actually made 5 even higher commitments. He called this the Panchamrit. He said that India will increase the non-fossil fuel capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. Not just this, India for the first time ever joined the world by saying that we will achieve a net zero target by 2070, meaning that India will become a carbon neutral country by 2070. Now, this was a huge announcement, although the developed nations have been trying to pressurize India to give a date of our carbon neutrality, but no one thought that India will actually make such a commitment. We went ahead, however, and made this commitment that by 2070, India will achieve the net zero target. Now, what the author here is saying is that all these targets are good, All these kind of commitments that the government of India has been making are very, very good. But we should never lose a sight of reality. In order to achieve all these targets, we require a lot of investment, not just from within India, but from international corporations as well. Without those and without a major change in how our economy actually runs, these targets would not be possible. The good part, however, is India is one of the very, very few countries around the world that are actually on path to achieve their commitments. But the higher commitments made by Prime Minister in 2021 have increased the pressure on India. The article is saying that India should try its best, but we should only make those commitments that actually are possible, because it is not that easy to take finance from international organizations for climate change purposes. Now, in the Paris climate deal, and I'm sure all of you would be aware of it, these are the kind of commitments that were made. India, China, US, EU, all of those made these commitments. Now, do understand these commitments are obviously not binding. So, if a nation says that we will commit this and they don't follow this up, there is no punishment given to them. In fact, as you know, soon after US actually signed the Paris climate deal, Donald Trump came to power and he announced that USA will not be a part of Paris agreement anymore. Thankfully, however, Joe Biden has brought US back into this. But as you can see, these are not binding and the governments can change their commitments whenever they want. Also, these are the 5 pledges that the Prime Minister had renewed just last year. India will increase a non-fossil fuel capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2050. The earlier target was India will meet 40% of its energy from renewable energy. Now we have increased it to 50%. We will also reduce the total projected carbon emission by 1 billion tons from now till 2030. Now we have also increased the target of carbon intensity reduction by 45% instead of 33 to 35%. And the biggest announcement that no one had expected was that India will achieve the net zero by 2070. The other nations across the world, for example, China has pledged a net zero by 2060. USA has done this by 2050. The most aggressive of the commitments has been made by EU, that is the European Union. Also, whenever we talk about the carbon emissions, there is one point of view that all of you must understand. Nations such as India, China included, get a lot of pressure from the Western nations that we should make much higher commitments. Because if you look at the total CO2 emission from India and China, it is very, very high. India would come in the top 5 in the world if you look at the total carbon emissions. However, if you take that number in terms of per capita CO2 emission, that is when the real story unfolds. These are the top nations when it comes to per capita emission of carbon dioxide. Look at nations such as US, Saudi Arabia, Canada, UAE, Netherlands, Japan. These are all near the top. India is not even amongst the top 50 nations in this list. If we talk about China, China is close to about 40th position. India is nowhere near even in top 50. So India is much, much way below if you look at the per capita CO2 emissions, and that is why it is not logical to pressurize India only to make these kind of commitments to cut down on our carbon emission, because cutting down on carbon emission would also mean curtailing our industrial and economic development. The next article that we have here is based on the Government of India's decision to withdraw the Personal Data Protection Bill of 2019. The Government of India just a couple of days back announced that you are withdrawing the Personal Data Protection Bill, and we'll make a new bill in some time that will be in line with the Supreme Court's guidelines in the Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus the Union of India case. They also said that we will again relook into the recommendations given by Sri Krishna Committee because many of them were ignored. Now, the fact is that the 2019 bill that the government has actually taken back was about how your data will be protected. The data that you submit with social media platforms, how will that data be protected? Can the government access it or not? These were the kind of proposals in the bill. It was highly criticized also because the 2019 bill did not accept most of the recommendations of the Justice Sri Krishna Committee that had actually suggested having a data protection authority with members from the government also, members from the judiciary also, to look into all these allegations of data theft. But the 2019 bill said that this authority will have members only from the government, only from the executive, and no one from judiciary, no one from outside. Not just this, this 2019 bill had actually allowed the government a lot more powers to exempt many government agencies from this act. So, a lot of government agencies which the government thought are working in the interest of public order were given a freedom not to share data, or were given a freedom to take people's data whenever they wanted. All this was criticized by many people across the country who believe that government will be misusing this to get hold of a lot of personal data, especially those who criticize the government, and then the government can use that to shut down the voices and the opinions of those people. However, the good part is that now the government has decided to withdraw this bill altogether, at least for now. Now, these are the esteemed members of the B.N. Sri Krishna committee that the article is actually referring to. Justice B.N. Sri Krishna is a retired Supreme Court judge. A committee was formed under his leadership for proposing what should be the draft Personal Data Protection Bill. Now, this is what the committee had said. The committee said the law will have jurisdiction over personal data which is used, shared, disclosed, or processed in the country. The law will cover processing of personal data by both public and private entities. It will not include sensitive data, which includes financial data, health data, sexual orientation, biometric, etc. It said that when a consumer submits the data to a government entity or to a private entity, if that entity has to use that data for something else, they must take consent from the individuals, clearly telling when exactly and where exactly are they going to be using that data. Sensitive personal data should not be used, and the consent will have to be explicitly taken from the people. Penalties will be imposed if the data protection law is misused. For example, if you give your data to Facebook, your gender, your age, your likes, etc., and if they sell that data to some other company which can misuse it, then Facebook should be punished. This is the prime objective of this particular bill. Facebook should first take permission from you, only then they should be able to use it. Not just Facebook, but public entities also included. The entities that process the data of children will have to develop mechanism for age verification and also get the consent of their parents. These were the major provisions of the B.N. Sri Krishna committee, but the critics said that when the government finally made the draft bill of 2019, most of these were ignored. Now the government is saying that we will go back to a drawing board and we will remake this. Now from the examination point of view, because the bill has been withdrawn, so you now don't need to focus a lot on what were the provisions of the 2019 bill, because it has been withdrawn, it has not passed. If the new bill comes and that passes, I would suggest you to learn the provisions of the new version of the bill. The bill that has already been withdrawn, now that is not very relevant. What is relevant for you is the recommendations given by this committee. And if the new bill comes and passes, that will also be important. These were the main provisions of the data protection bill. Data can be processed or shared by any entity only after the consent given by the person. It includes penalties for misuse of data. It talks about three types of data: general data, sensitive data, and critical data. The government was expected to form an authority also to look into the application of this law. The social media companies were also told what exactly do you have to do and what exactly will be the punishment if you do not fulfill these obligations. These are the main articles of the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. First, the open network for digital commerce has the potential to create an even playing field between the local offline stores and big businesses in India. Do you agree? Elaborate. Second, India's relations with Taiwan must not be guided by China's relationship with Taiwan. Discuss. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a wonderful day ahead.